Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview Ronald Flagg, president of Legal Services Corporation, whose lifelong dedication to civil rights has helped transform access to justice for millions of low-income Americans facing life-changing legal challenges. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host. I'm really excited today to have Ron Flagg on. He asked me not to call him Ronald, but Ron Flagg is the president of Legal Services Corporation. He had a long career of working in this space and working with Legal Services Corporation for many years as general counsel and making great strides in broadening the base of access to justice. And it's something that I greatly admire him for, and am very honored to have him on the show today. Ron, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be here. And as I think I just said to you off camera, it's particularly good to be here because I spent a lot of time talking about the justice gap, the difference between the legal needs of low and moderate income Americans and the resources available to meet those needs. But even before you get to that, there's a knowledge gap. Nobody knows about that. And so any opportunity such as this podcast to tell people about what we do is really appreciated. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And you're right. I mean, a lot of times we are in a bit of our own bubble and we kind of know what we know, and the friends that we have that are colleagues in this area community, they also know it. But the general public, general American public at large, I don't think they understand the depth of this and how many people it impacts, and how for years you and others have been trying to make a difference in this space.
Yeah, let me actually point a finger at a source of this knowledge gap, and it's the TV show and its progeny, Law and Order. Everybody in America has watched, multiple episodes over the last 30 years of Law and Order, and in every single episode, at some point, somebody has read the Miranda warning that says you have a right to a lawyer, and one will be appointed if you can't afford one. So most people think, oh, okay, if I'm in danger of losing my house, my child, my veterans benefits, my disability payments, if I'm having troubles with FEMA after my home blew away in a hurricane, it's just like Law and Order. A lawyer will be appointed if I can't afford one. But in civil matters, as opposed to criminal matters, which is what Law and Order is about, you don't have an automatic right to a lawyer, and the only way you can get it generally is through legal aid. So we have a lot of work to do to correct that misperception.
So the interesting thing is that for a lot of people, they don't realize that until it's actually something they're faced with themselves personally. And then they learn that the help isn't there that they might need.
That's right. Maybe they're hit by a hurricane, a tornado, a flood, or the pandemic hits, and what seemed like a secure economic situation for them crumbles when both wage earners in the household lose their jobs, and then all of a sudden they go from being financially secure to being financially insecure, and unfortunately qualify for civil legal aid, and may not even know that it exists or where it can be located.
And right now you're in Washington, D.C., is that right?
Correct.
A bit of a heat wave right now?
It's upward close to 100, but it's hot throughout the country. And while I'm in Washington, D.C., the work that we fund is done throughout the country. This is not a we grant away 94% of the federal appropriation we get to legal aid programs in every zip code in America.
What was the percentage of that?
We get an appropriation from Congress, and we grant out 94% of it to 130 legal aid programs that serve every congressional district, every zip code in America.
Wow, 94%. That's a pretty good return on investment there.
Yeah, and if you sort of dig, that's what we as the funder, that's our percentage. But then if you look at what the investment in our grantees and the people they serve do, for every $1 in civil legal aid funding, that yields an average $7 return to the economy. That's 700% is a pretty good return on investment. And how is that? It's because for example, funding saves taxpayer money by preventing domestic violence to becoming a burden on law enforcement, or solving legal issues before they spiral out of control, or keeping people in their homes rather than having them have to be in shelters, which are much more costly than paying a few hours of legal time. So that's why you see across the country, anytime a return on investment study is done, it always has a big return on investment for investment in civil legal aid.
Absolutely. So you have the return on investment in terms of dollars, but also in terms of peace of mind. As you pointed out, these things come up for people in different ways, domestic violence or getting evicted or something like that. And whenever it's a legal problem, it's something that's a distraction, a waste of time, like it's taking you away from your normal life as someone who is in need of help. And so you're being able to help organizations that can help them avoid that is a huge boom to the public.
And anybody who's done legal aid work, or maybe social work, or other work with particularly low-income people, nobody has just one problem. And let's take an eviction, for example. Being evicted is not just a housing issue. It quickly becomes an education issue because now your kids are no longer in the district. It becomes an employment issue because now I'm not located in a place where I can get public transportation to work. It becomes a family issue because we can't find a place where we can all be securely. It becomes a potential criminal justice issue because you can see statistically that people who are rendered without a home are more likely to end up enmeshed in the criminal justice system. It becomes a health issue, as we saw during COVID, when people who were safer in their own homes have to cluster with other people, and associated with that is a statistically significant increase in the likelihood of health issues.
Quality of life issue, actual life issue, life events, and that snowball effect that you mentioned, like it just one thing leads to another. It's like dominoes. So amazing that there's such efficient use of the money that's appropriated, 94% of it going to the people that need it. And then the multiplier effect of having a return on investment of 700% is not too shabby. So with all of that said, and that being a nice teaser for what we're going to get to a little later, as the audience knows, I do like to take a turn and go backwards before we go forward. And I'd like to ask you a little bit. We don't have to go too in depth into it, but I do want to ask you about your origin story and where you grew up and all that. I know, as you mentioned, you're in DC now, but did you grow up there?
No, I actually grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Milwaukee. And you ended up going to University of Chicago, though, right?
Yes, I did. And I, when I was a kid growing up in Milwaukee, I frequently went to the Museum of Science and Industry on the south side of Chicago, and that was just a short walk away from the University of Chicago. I can't say that that is actually the reason I went to the University of Chicago, but I was familiar with the university from those trips. But no, I think the part of my origin story that bears on what I'm doing today at Legal Services Corporation is really my family story, my parents' story. My parents were both Holocaust survivors. I guess they were not in concentration camps, but they both escaped from the Nazis in the late 1930s and ended up, my mother directly coming to this country in December of 1938, and my father going to England on the Kinder transport and then being in the British Army and eventually making his way to the United States. But their backstory really meant that they focused very heavily on civil rights, having been denied civil rights formative years in Germany. And, that was something that we talked a lot about at home. And, I remember listening to the radio of the roll call vote for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 at the age of 10. So I'm not sure how that happened, but clearly my parents had an influence on me then. And I think it's, carried forward to the work I've been doing for, much of my career.
Well, I definitely can see how those are formative experiences, and the influence of your parents and understanding and hearing their stories, and that setting a direction for you.
That's exactly how it happened.
If you don't mind sharing a little bit about what it was like, where you grew up, and what your parents did, and what kind of work they did, and maybe if they shared any of those lessons or experiences with you.
Yeah, it was interesting because they actually, particularly as when I was a kid, did not speak all that much about their experiences in Germany. They were too painful and they wanted to move forward. Neither of my parents were able to go to college. My mother was the valedictorian in her high school, a large high school in New York, which is where she landed when she arrived from Germany, but her family didn't have the means to send her to college. My father escaped Germany as when he was 15 or 16, and pretty quickly found himself in the British Army. And by the time he got to the United States, he'd not been in the U.S. Army, so he was not covered by the GI Bill, which might have paid for his educational expenses. But both my parents, maybe particularly because they had not been able to go to college, were really intent that their three sons, myself and my two brothers, would, have a better life by, through education. And so that was a big emphasis in our house. I mean, it's not that they looked over our shoulders that we were doing our homework, but it was clear from the way they talked and, just their interest, their own intellectual curiosity, despite not having an advanced education, that that was something they thought was important to everybody, not just their family, but so getting a good education and, going to college and then doing something with whatever you learned and whatever advantages you've been given to, sort of pay back people who didn't have those advantages. That was all part of the values that they transmitted to my brothers and myself.
Were you the oldest?
I am. Yep.
Yeah. So with that, you go to University of Chicago and you major in public affairs, right?
Right. So it was sort of an interdisciplinary study involving politics and economics and a few other social sciences, but it was all, by that point, I was pretty focused on wanting to go to law school, and just, the heroes of my youth, the people who were casting the votes in favor of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, a lot of them seemed to be lawyers. So that, to me, even without necessarily a career in politics, seemed like a good way forward to try to help people.
There's a couple of camps with people that I talk to that go to law school that are lawyers. One is that they have no idea that that's what they wanted to do, but they kind of made the choice because it seemed practical and they wanted to be able to survive and pay the bills. and others that seem like from an earlier age they were drawn towards the law. And it sounds like you're in the latter camp.
Yeah, and I again, not just sort of drawn toward law as a academic uh, exercise or even a profession, that I thought was laudable, which I think is the case. But it just seemed to me to be a set of skills and uh, creating opportunities to help people.
You go to Harvard Law School, right?
Yeah.
What that makes me think of is a lot of a lot of the first impressions I had of law school when I was reading 1L back in the day, and the paper chase and all
Well,
that.
one L was actually my class. Scott Turow was a classmate of mine, so it's an amalgam of a bunch of people that I went to law school with.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, I guess yeah, in a weird way I was reading about your experiences there.
Well, I don't know if it was my experiences, but certainly the experiences of people I was in law school with.
Harvard Law School, especially at that time, it seems to have had quite quite an influence on the world of law and what people think of it. And I was just wondering from that, what was your experience of going there? Was it the kind of heady stuff that we would see in Hollywood, or was it more practical?
Uh, it was in a sense neither. I mean, if I had to do it over again, or if I gave advice to somebody, I would urge them to do something else between college and law school. I went straight from college to law school. I went through college in 3 years. So to me, law school was just another 3 years of school. And I met a lot of people. I made a lot of good friends, and I found it intellectually interesting. And I did have some public service experiences working for the state attorney general that really stuck with me. Um, but it was not as heady as I think it was for people who had done something else for a number of years and then came back to law school, in a very affirmative way, having seen other aspects of life and deciding this is the route for me to do something specific. And I think Scott Turow himself had been a writing professor, I think, before he went to law school. And I think for people who did something other than school for several years, they're thinking about law. So they had much higher hopes and expectations for law school than they might have had they just been another 3 years of continuing education. But high expectations sometimes are rewarded and sometimes are dashed. And I think you see in books like 1L both of those things. People have very high expectations, and sometimes they're disappointed. Whereas I was probably on a more even keel because it was just, to my mind, another 3 years of school. And I wish it hadn't been that way. I wish I'd gone in with a sort of a fresher perspective on what I could get out of school than I did.
Well, it was shortly after that that you went to work at Sidley Austin, right?
Yeah, I clerked for 2 years for a federal judge in Milwaukee, and then I went to the Justice Department for 2 years, and then I went to Sidley uh, in 1982 and was there for the next 3 decades.
Yeah, 30 years at Sidley. Um, I mean, that in itself, like that's um, what was that like for you? Like, I know it's kind of hard. It's an unfair question to ask about 30 years of there, but
No, well, I will say I had a, I was really blessed. I think Sidley is a great firm. I had a great time. I had many friends that I made. I worked on really interesting cases. I had numerous mentors who were fabulous lawyers and who I worked closely with and I learned from. And I had, I worked with those mentors throughout those 30 years. It wasn't just the first 15 minutes I was there. but the other aspect of it that was really, uh, fortunate and a blessing was early on, I started doing a lot of pro bono work, and the firm encouraged that. And I pretty quickly found myself first as chair of the pro bono committee in Washington, D.C., and then shortly after that, I became firm-wide chair of the firm-wide pro bono committee. And for a firm of over 1,000, close to 2,000 lawyers, that's a lot of resources um, to galvanize across the country and the world for the cause of good. And the firm was very supportive of pro bono work, and be able to do both my own cases, but also have a hand in thinking strategically how to promote pro bono work at Sidley was tremendously exciting and rewarding work. And, it's not something that many people in private practice get an opportunity to do.
And it sounds like a fertile work, soil and working ground to prepare yourself for LSC, where you became general counsel.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I worked with so many thoughtful, brilliant, kind people at Sidley that, as well as encountering many leaders in the of the legal aid community and the public service community. So it gave me a lot of different experiences that have been useful to me since I joined LSC 12 years ago.
Well, let's talk about LSC. Um, I I know that probably most people that are watching this are not familiar with it, and it's my sincere hope that as a consequence of this, more people will become aware of it because I didn't know of it, frankly, decade or two ago, um, but over the past decade, for me, become aware of it and its crucial role in American society. And let's start with the basics. Um, what is LSC?
Well, that's a great question. So, LSC is the single largest funder of civil legal aid. What is civil legal aid? Let me, uh, people face civil legal issues, and 50 years ago, Congress decided that the quality of justice in America should not turn on whether or not you had the money to hire a lawyer. So, I don't like to talk in abstraction. So, civil legal aid is Victoria in Illinois, who hid with her 2-year-old son in the trunk of a pediatrician's car to escape her abusive spouse, and who needed a legal aid attorney to help her permanently separate from that relationship. Civil legal aid is Larry, a Navy veteran in Louisiana who would have lost his house. Well, he did lose his house in a, a hurricane in Louisiana, but he got it back by means of support he got from legal aid in Louisiana. He was able to rebuild it. Or the young child in Georgia who was cured of sickle cell anemia because a legal aid attorney helped fix the paperwork error that was causing an insurance company to deny the critical transplant that child needed. So that's what civil legal aid does. It helps uh, hardworking Americans to get the help they need to navigate either the court system or the administrative bureaucracy that they would otherwise have to face without civil legal aid. And LSC, Legal Services Corporation, is a funder. So we're not the ones helping Victoria or Larry or that child in Georgia directly, but we're funding the programs throughout the country, 130 of them that are providing those services. We're the largest funder to do that. On average, the programs we fund get 40% of their funding from us. It obviously varies. In some places, it's as low as, say, 18% of their funding. In other places, it's as much as 80% of their funding. But that's what we do, is we fund legal aid so people like uh, Larry and Victoria and others in similar circumstances can get the help they need.
And that's amazing, much needed, assistance. And I love the fact that you bring up those individual stories because it really drives home concrete, life experiences that people are having that a lot of us can relate to or know someone who's been affected that way. Um, l- but let me ask you some more simple questions because I know that some of these things still, to people that might be hearing it, they don't necessarily understand. Like, for example, what is legal aid?
Legal aid is help given to people with legal problems, and the help can come from a lawyer or a paralegal or other staff person, or it could come at times from uh, a self-help tool, for example, that in the more sophisticated version of it would be sort of like TurboTax. You know, uh, what's your name? My name's Ron. Good morning, Ron. What's your problem? My landlord has kicked me out, and we'll guide you through an interview. And if it's, if the program is sophisticated and robust enough, and maybe it's driven by AI, and so it over time can understand how helpful or unhelpful it's been and learn from those experiences. It can either refer me to somebody who needs help or can guide me through an interview and create a document, an answer to an eviction complaint or an answer to a divorce complaint or draft a divorce complaint if that's what I need. So legal aid basically is assistance that will provide help to somebody who has a legal problem.
And you had mentioned, a handful of stories of people that are affected by legal problems that legal aid can help with. How pervasive are these types of legal issues? Like, what's the scale of this affecting Americans?
Yeah, no, it's much more common than people would imagine, given the fact that nobody's heard of legal aid. We did a survey in just a few years ago, and the survey showed that three quarters, 74% of people living under the federal poverty, 125% of the federal poverty limit, 74% uh, uh, were confronted by at least one civil legal issue every year. I think it was something like 50% had five or more civil legal issues every year. And when we talk about the justice gap, what we're talking about is so you've got this enormous mass of people, three quarters of whom are confronting these really life impacting issues, losing their home, losing custody of a child, not getting their veterans benefits, not getting help in rebuilding their lives after a natural disaster. It's getting help with those things, and that's what civil legal aid does: is help people that are facing these life impacting problems. And what I was going to say is, it turns out that because of the insufficient funding of civil legal aid, over 90% of the problems, the sorts of problems we're talking about, evictions, child custody cases, veterans benefit cases, over 90% of those problems do not get either any or certainly all of the help that is needed to fully deal with them. So that's when we refer to the justice gap. That's one of the data points that we're referring to.
Wow. So, okay, so not only are people that are probably in the least favorable position to defend themselves against legal issues, namely that they don't have a lot of money to spend on lawyers, like not only are they experiencing quite a number of legal issues on a yearly basis, but then they don't have the money to get the expertise that they need, and 90% of those concerns go completely unaddressed. which probably, as you mentioned before, exacerbates and snowballs the problems into greater problems.
Yeah, and in fact, I said 74% have one issue. If you're uh, a survivor of domestic violence, uh, probably 90 or 95% of the people in that category, that is, survivor of domestic violence, have 5 or even 10 or more civil legal issues every year. So again, civil legal issues tend to come up in clusters. They don't come up one at a time.
So I think I understand better like the breadth of the problem. I'm also kind of curious. Before LSC was around, you know, like when I teach, at Suffolk Law, and when I talk to my students, one of the things I like to show them is like the before picture and then the after picture. The before picture being before LSC was around. What happened then? Just you know, how did LSC come about to address that problem? Was it so bad at the time that people felt it really necessary? Like, what was that picture like?
Yeah, you go back to the early 1900s, maybe the teens, and individual legal aid programs popped up locally in a few places, not in any great volume, and certainly there was no network of receiving common funds. The idea that civil legal aid could be important to improving people's lives, to empowering them, to help them not only address their problems, but even improve their life situation significantly. Was probably first surfaced during the Johnson administration, and federal funding for civil legal aid started in 1964 as part of the Office of Economic Opportunity. And so there was some federal funding for civil legal aid starting in 1964, and that continued for the better part of a decade. The issue that came up in Congress then in the 1970s, the early 1970s, was where and how to continue that federal support for civil legal aid. And there were two thoughts. One was to create an executive branch agency entity that would be funded and be part of the government and the executive branch. And then the alternative to that was to have a private 501c3, which is what LSC is now, that would get federal funding. And Congress chose the latter construct, to have a federally funded nonprofit, frankly, to insulate it from changes in executive branch administration, so that if a president came along who didn't want to support legal aid, that would not be the death knell for civil legal aid. And so that's what was enacted by Congress in 1974. It was signed by Richard Nixon, so signed by a Republican president. It was possibly President Nixon's the last bill he signed. If it wasn't the last, it was nearly the last. And so LSC we've just celebrated our 50th anniversary in 2024, and we have been funded by Congress for the last 50 years, and that's how, in a nutshell, we came into being.
Well, one thing I want to bring to the audience's attention that I think you've mentioned elsewhere. I was at the LSC's ITC conference in January, and I think you may have mentioned it then. But the current the budget that you have does not fully address the need that I think you pointed out that if you were to actually budget for what the need is, it would be something like between 5 to 10 times what the current budget is.
Yeah, I mean, so again, we have a lot of data on the justice gap. So in addition to the 92% number I mentioned, the percentage of problems that don't get the assistance they need to be solved, are the programs we fund turn away half the people who make it to their door. And of course, that's only a small percentage of the people who actually have problems. There are a lot of people who have problems that don't understand they have a legal problem. They get a notice of a lawsuit from a creditor that says, you owe $2,000 in credit card debt, and they view it as a financial problem, not realizing that the $2,000 number may be wrong, that there may be a defect in the way it was filed, that they may have legal defenses to it. Um, you know, uh, so that people don't understand necessarily that they have legal problems. They don't know what legal aid is. They may be afraid of lawyers. So half the people who make it to our grantee's door get turned away. And our annual appropriation request to Congress is calculated in a pretty simple way. We say, instead of turning away half the people who come to our door, what financial support would we need to fully serve those people? And the number is roughly $2.1 billion, and our current budget is $560 million. But that's the budget that yields the 50% turnaway rate and the 92% underserved rate.
Yeah, and if you take into account, as you mentioned, the return on investment could be 7 to 1, then that $2 billion+ is really well spent and helps the economy and just everyone maybe just have a better quality of life.
No, you've said help the economy, and that may be counterintuitive, but that's exactly right. I mean, if you keep somebody in their home, and as a result, they're able to keep their job, and their kids are able to stay in school, and their health is improved. I mean, it doesn't take an economic PhD to understand. That means people are staying in their jobs. It means their life chances are much better. They're likely to be taxpayers rather than relying on public benefits, and so it benefits them individually. It's more just. It makes for better communities. It makes for a better America.
So the economy, the markets, they like stability. Stability is the foundation of our economy, our country, and it keeps people moving forward rather than getting bogged down in these issues that we're talking about. And
Yeah,
so,
let me interrupt you for just a sec. I
yeah,
mean, to that point, just in the last couple days, over 100 general counsels of the largest companies in America signed a letter to Congress saying you need to fund LSC. And why did they do that? I mean, it's exactly for the reason you said. They understood that their employees, their customers, America needs a justice system that's fair and effective. A justice system that denies justice to a substantial percentage of people, is not justice for everybody. In fact, it's really justice for nobody.
agreed. And beyond the social justice aspect of it, just economically, I think my personal belief is that that's why this country's been so successful and so wealthy in that stability that we have had in place that has been quite unique around the world to have such peace and prosperity is because of the rule of law, and it's because of these ways of supporting each other that prevents us from being distracted with things that we could prevent. And with all of that, I just wanted to ask you, because the big news item that that came out and that you brought to everyone's attention um, is that there's a potential budget cut of, I think, almost the entirety of any appropriation for LSC.
Well, that's right. The administration submitted its budget at the end of May, and for domestic spending, and proposed to eliminate LSC. I included a few dollars for us to mop up things and close down operations. And I'll say a couple things. One, it would have, if it were enacted, it would have devastating effect. I mean, again, I prefer to talk about people by name, but let me give you some of the numbers. I talked about Victoria from Illinois and survivor of domestic violence. Cutting out LSC funding would deprive over 200,000 survivors of domestic violence help. I talked about Larry in Louisiana. 44,000 veterans like Larry would not be able to get legal aid if LSC funding were cut. I talked about that child in Georgia who was cured of sickle cell anemia. More than 1 million children would be denied civil legal aid if LSC's funding were cut. Seniors, about 300,000 seniors would be denied the assistance they need in civil legal matters if our budget was cut. Now, the good news is in all of this that we have historically had strong bipartisan support. We have both Republicans and Democrats who support LSC. And when the first Trump administration in 4 consecutive years proposed to eliminate LSC, which they did in 2017, 18, 19, and 20, Congress did not go along with it and actually increased LSC's budget in 2 out of the 4 years and left it stable for the other 2 years. So I think we're working to make sure that people in Congress, our supporters, are heard, and that everybody in Congress understands that their work is constituent services. That's what our work is. That is what the work of our grantees is core constituent services. In fact, when members of Congress get calls from somebody saying, "Oh my gosh, my house was taken away in a flood, and I have issues with FEMA and I don't know how to fill out the forms," what they do is they refer their constituents to legal aid to help with that. If people have issues with domestic violence or child custody, people call their members of Congress for almost any issue that arises in their life. They have on their Rolodex, the legal aid programs in their district or their state. So, we view ourselves as, really partners in providing core constituent services, and we're hopeful that Congress will recognize it, will recognize the return on investment, which we've been talking about, and as a result of those things, will continue to fund us.
Absolutely, that's my hope too. That you know, in a way, you do make those senators and representatives look good because you provide the services that underlie what they promised that they could do. But people that are experiencing poverty are not one political stripe or another. It affects all of us, and to be able to support each other in that way is a critical function. I think it would be a travesty for everyone, regardless of politics, if LSC were not to be funded. And I hope that it, as you pointed out, remains a supported bipartisan. I do want to ask you though, like if we were to think of the alternative, what would that look like? How would things work if there weren't funding? Because as you mentioned, it's over, I think 130 legal aid organizations are funded through LSC. What would those very same politicians be looking at?
Well, I think what you'd see across the country are the numbers of people who wouldn't be served, but it would be the impact would would differ across jurisdictions. There are jurisdictions like Alabama and Arizona, which provide no state support for civil legal aid. And, the legal aid programs that are funded by LSC in those states, are getting 70 or 80% of their funding from LSC. Uh, you don't have to be a business guru to understand that if you lose 70% of your revenues, you're in serious danger of going out of business. And so, where today there is help for people, we have a court system that was designed by lawyers on the assumption that people would have lawyers in using the system. If LSC is eliminated, the people who today get legal aid will be, using a system with both hands tied behind their back and blindfolded. And, there's a reason, as a result of that phenomenon, about 37 state Supreme Court Chief Justices wrote a letter to Congress urging robust funding for civil legal aid. 40 bipartisan state attorneys general wrote a letter to Congress urging that LSC be funded. You can't get 40 state attorneys general to agree that the sun rises in the east. So we view that support both from the chief justices and from the state attorneys general as further evidence of the importance of civil legal aid. And on the flip side, the enormous damage that would be done to the justice system if that assistance was not available.
So for people that are listening to this, and maybe it's the first time that they understand what's going on when it comes to legal aid and people, needing this type of help and how many people it affects, and it could be their very neighbors. What can they do to help? What can they do to try to help you and everyone who's affected to stay funded, to spread this even further so that more people are helped? How could they possibly make a difference?
I'll just state what the facts are. The budget is ultimately decided by Congress, and individual members of Congress will vote on an appropriations bill that will or will not include funding for Legal Services Corporation. But I think members of Congress are certainly in tune to what their constituents have to say, and if members of Congress hear, by letter, by telephone, or by social media that this is an important issue to people, I think that will resonate with them.
Well, let me turn now to a couple of questions that I ask all of my guests. The first one has to do with, there's obviously a lot going on. There's a lot of concerns that you're dealing with in terms of funding, in terms of helping people, and 130 different legal aid organizations that rely on LSC. How do you keep a work-life balance? How do you keep time for yourself and your family working on all this?
Well, I'll be candid and say, for starters, and my wife would violently object if I didn't say this to begin with. It's hard to maintain work-life balance, but it's helped at least a little bit by the fact that I have grandchildren ages 1 and 3. They don't live locally, so when I need to, other than when I talk to them on by video, so I think spending time with my grandchildren is certainly one way I stay grounded.
And so this next question, it may be related to that, but when you do all of this over the course of your career, the many things that you've had your hands in, what makes it worthwhile for you?
Oh, I think, I go back to where we started. my parents instilled in me the value of serving people, and to at the age of 71 be doing something that helps people means a lot to me. Between the pandemic um, and other things that are going on in the world, uh, we all of us have had a lot of moments where we felt helpless, that things were going on in the world over which we had no control, and we've all felt helpless. Having a job where at least some part of every day I feel helpful is a blessing beyond measure.
Well, Ron, on behalf of myself and I know a number of people in the community and across the country, I just want to thank you very much for your work, what you do, what LSC does, the devotion of your career to helping people. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
And so, for everyone who's watching that wants to keep in touch with you, learn more about LSC, help out, and support its work, how can they keep in touch?
The easiest way is to go to lsc.gov, and you can learn more about LSC. You can see ways you can help out. We're very active on social media, uh, pretty much all of the popular vehicles. And so if you look for LSC on social media, and if you like what we're saying, share it with your networks, that'd be great.
Well, thanks again, Ron, for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
And for all of you there at home or at work, thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LaDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LaDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.